The Disposable ERA, Part 1. Most people look at a skyline and see a monument to human progress, but if you have an architectural degree and a cynical eye, you see a massive, ticking pile of unpaid liability. We have officially entered the era of the disposable building, a period in history where we've traded the survival of our civilization for the short-term quarterly gains of real estate investment trusts. If you walk through Rome today, you'll find the Pantheon. It's been standing for nearly 2,000 years, surviving earthquakes, wars, and the collapse of empires. It is the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome, and it remains perfectly intact without a single piece of steel inside those walls. Now, contrast that with the luxury glass and steel condo that just went up in your downtown area. I can guarantee you that condo won't be here in 100 years, let alone 2,000. We are the first civilization in history that builds monuments with a pre-programmed expiration date, and we're doing it because longevity is no longer profitable in a debt-driven economy. The secret of the Romans wasn't just ancient magic, it was a sophisticated, high-level understanding of material chemistry that we have intentionally ignored for the sake of cutting costs and accelerating construction. According to a recent MIT study on Roman engineering, their concrete used a specific mix of volcanic ash, pozzolana, and limeclasts that allowed for a phenomenon known as self-healing. When a microscopic crack formed, water would seep in, react with the lime, and literally fill the gap with new crystal structures before the damage could spread. They built for eternity because their economy wasn't based on the concept of churn or replacement cycles. We, however, build for the warranty period. Most modern high-rises are designed with what engineers call a 50-year design life. You can look this up on the Wikipedia page for service life. It is the industry standard. We aren't building legacies. We are building temporary financial instruments that happen to have a lobby and a gym. Once that 50-year mark hits, the cost of maintenance begins to exceed the value of the rent, and the building is marked for a managed decline or total demolition. The biggest technical culprit in this collapse is the Steel Rebar Paradox. In every architecture school on the planet, we are taught that steel makes concrete stronger because it handles tension while concrete handles compression. That is a beautiful, convenient truth for the first few decades, but in the long run, steel is a structural cancer. Concrete is naturally alkaline, which creates what we call a passivation layer, a chemical shield that protects the steel from rusting. But over time, a process called carbonation takes place. Carbon dioxide from the atmosphere slowly seeps into the porous concrete and reacts with the calcium hydroxide. This reaction lowers the pH of the concrete, stripping away that protective shield. Once the alkalinity drops below a certain threshold, any moisture or oxygen that reaches the rebar turns it into rust. Here is the punchline: rust expands to 4 to 7 times its original volume. This creates massive internal pressure that literally blows the concrete apart from the inside out. Structural engineers call this spalling, but it's more accurately described as a structural death sentence. We've traded 2,000 years of stability for 50 years of cheap, fast height, and we are just now beginning to see the cracks in the foundation of that trade. Why do we keep using a system that we know is destined to explode? You have to follow the money into the world of real estate investment trusts, REITs, and private equity. In the eyes of a global fund, a building isn't a place for humans to thrive, it's a depreciable asset. Under modern tax codes, you can depreciate a commercial building over roughly 30 to 40 years. Once the tax benefits are milked dry, and the maintenance costs for the leaking glass curtain walls and failing HVAC systems start to spike, the highest and best use of the land usually involves tearing the whole thing down. Longevity is actually a massive disadvantage in a debt-driven economy. If a building lasts 500 years, the developer only gets paid once. If it lasts 40, they get to rebuild it, refinance it, and sell it 10 times over in the same time frame. We have replaced the art of masonry with the science of planned obsolescence. If you want a real-world example of this financial and engineering madness, look no further than the Millennium Tower in San Francisco. It is a 58-story luxury residential masterpiece that was finished in 2009. Within just a few years of completion, it had already sunk 18 inches into the soft soil and tilted 14 inches to the side. This is a multi-million-dollar structural disaster that happened because the builders decided not to anchor the concrete piles all the way into the bedrock to save a quick buck during construction. The Wikipedia page for the Millennium Tower reads like a horror story of corporate greed versus the unforgiving laws of physics. We are constantly pushing the limits of materials like AAC, autoclaved aerated concrete, and thin film glass because they are cheap to ship and fast to assemble on site, but they possess the long-term structural integrity of a wet cracker compared to traditional stone or brick. We are building hyper-complex, high-performance structural envelopes that fail completely the absolute moment a single plastic seal or rubber gasket is broken. Then there is the great greenwashing lie of the 21st century. Developers love to brag about their LEED Platinum or BREEAM certifications. They put a trendy little garden on the roof, install some low-flow toilets, line the floors with recycled carpet tiles, and then they market the building to the public as a sustainable icon. But here is the critical math they don't want you to see: the embodied carbon of the structure. The amount of energy required to mine the raw ore, smelt the steel, and fire the massive kilns for the cement is astronomical. Tearing down a perfectly functional 40-year-old concrete building just to replace it with a new, shiny green glass tower creates more CO2 than that new building could ever save in operational energy efficiency over its entire, short lifespan. The most sustainable building is almost always the one that is already built and stays built. But you can't get a flashy ribbon-cutting ceremony or a lucrative government tax break for a building that is simply sitting there, being durable and unremarkable. We have completely abandoned the famous Vitruvian triad of architecture: firmitas, utilitas, and venustas. Strength, utility, and beauty. We've completely replaced it with a single, cold, corporate metric: internal rate of return. Look at the Evergrande crisis in China. They built thousands of high-rises, entire ghost cities, using the cheapest possible materials and the fastest possible methods just to keep a massive debt bubble from popping on the global market. Now, those concrete buildings are literally crumbling and shedding their outer facades before the very first tenant has even moved in. It's a global epidemic of fast fashion urbanism. We are currently building at a physical scale the world has never seen before, but with a structural quality that would have made a medieval peasant laugh out loud. We are creating an urban world where the buildings are just as disposable as the cheap furniture inside them, and we have the audacity to call it innovation. Even our highly praised high-tech glass curtain walls are a massive, slow-motion trap for the next generation. A standard double-pane glass unit has a structural lifespan of maybe 25 to 30 years before the chemical seals fail and the insulating noble gas inside leaks out completely. Once that internal vacuum is lost, the building becomes an absolute thermal nightmare, impossible to heat in the winter and acting as a brutal greenhouse in the summer. To completely replace the glass skin on a modern 60-story tower costs almost as much as the original construction price of the entire building. We are leaving our children a catastrophic legacy of maintenance debt that they will never, ever be able to pay off. We are the first generation of architects who are intentionally designing ruins. We are using the most advanced 3D software in human history to calculate exactly how thin we can make a structural beam before it collapses under stress, rather than how thick we should make it so it lasts for future generations. Think about the sheer, unadulterated arrogance of that approach. We have more raw computing power than any previous generation of master builders, yet we use it exclusively to find the absolute minimum amount of material we can possibly get away with to pass inspection. In the past, if a master architect wasn't completely sure if a stone wall was strong enough to support a roof, they made it twice as thick. Today, if the engineering software says a steel beam is 1% over the structural safety limit, we shave it down immediately to save $5 on materials. We are actively optimizing our way directly into a structural catastrophe. Every single efficiency we find in the spreadsheets is just another critical point of failure being introduced into the physical system. We've turned a historic craft that was meant to provide shelter for centuries into a high-stakes game of mathematical chicken played against gravity. This isn't just a critique about buildings, it's a diagnostic look at the literal entropy of our entire culture. When a society stops building things designed to last for the next century, it is a definitive, terrifying sign that the society no longer believes there will be a next century. We've systematically traded the timeless for the trendy, and the structural bill is about to come due. Physics does not care about your marketing brochure, and it doesn't care about your quarterly stock price. Gravity is the single most patient creditor in the universe, and it always, eventually collects its dues. This infrastructure time bomb isn't just a theory, it is a mathematical certainty unfolding in real time beneath our feet. If you want to see the literal future of our greatest modern cities, stop looking up at the penthouse. Look down at the cracks forming in the dark basement of the newest luxury tower in your neighborhood. You aren't looking at a historical landmark, you're looking at a landfill in the sky. If you want to understand the grim math behind why our physical world is falling apart while the rents keep climbing every single month, hit subscribe. We're just beginning to peel back the layers of this architectural Ponzi scheme.
Subscribe if you want to see the cracks before they see you.